Welcome to Unit 4. Unit 4 is all about statistics. In Step 20, we're going to talk about the difference in numerical and categorical variables and different graphs to display these variables appropriately. We're going to talk about a dot plot, a histogram, and a box plot. Make sure you have your graphing calculator with you. You need your graphing calculator, not Desmos. So let's start with a dot plot. A dot plot is a data display that shows the frequency of data on a number line. Frequency is the number of turns. When you hear frequency, it's just the number of. Data, for our sense and our purposes, are numbers in a set used for statistical analysis. A dot plot is always graphed against the number line. We need the number line. So here we have the numbers 1 to 10. We can see that in the data set, there was 1 1, 3 3s, 2 4s, 1 6, and so on. A dot plot with a scaled number line can be used when the data represent a broad range with very specific values that do not repeat. So a scaled number line means the numbers are grouped. Not a single value. The first tick mark represents all numbers between 10 and 19.9. So we can see that there was one data value in that group. Again, we have a number line that is necessary with a dot plot. When it says very specific values, they're meaning decimals, not whole numbers. All right, the difference in a bar graph and a histogram. At first glance, they look pretty similar. But we're going to find the differences. A bar graph and a histogram. A bar graph compares categories of data with bars representing the frequencies. We know that frequency means the number of. It's comparing categories of data. In this example, favorite school subject, the categories are math, science, history, and music, where we can see 25 students prefer math, 20 prefer science, 10 history, 15 music. Notice that the bars do not touch. That's intentional because these are not numbers along the x-axis. These are the categories. So if we're graphing categories versus frequency, the categories along the x-axis and frequency along the y-axis, right? Number of meets frequency. Then we have a bar graph. The bars do not touch, counting the number in each category. A histogram is a type of bar graph used to display numerical data that have been organized into equal intervals. So now we have numbers along both the x and y axis. So here I have numbers, and here I have number of, which is frequency. The number of something, that's always a numerical data. That's always a number representing a number. So here we have TV shopping. We have price along the x-axis. So we have numbers, but more specifically, we have price. That's grouped. And along the y-axis, we have the number of TVs that fall into each group. So it depends on the type of data which graph we're going to use. If we have categories to compare, we use a bar graph. If we have numerical data to compare, then we will use a histogram. Box plots. A box plot breaks the data up into quarters. So, box plots divide the data into sections that each contain approximately 25% of the data in that set. So we're breaking the data up into quarters. We start with the minimum, and we end up at Q1. We call this the whisker or the tail. So we have 25% of the data between the minimum and Q1. Q1 is also called the lower quartile. The median is the middle of the data. So we can see that less than the median, we have 25 plus 25, which is 50% of the data. So we have 50% of the data less than the median, and 50% of the data greater than the median. The median cuts the data in half. That should make sense. Median cuts the data directly in half. Then we have the upper quartile called Q3. And then we have the maximum. So we need 5 numbers to create a box plot. This is also often called the 5-number summary. So to create a box plot, we need 5 numbers. We need the minimum, Q1, the median, which is also called Q2, Q3, and the maximum. And I'm going to show you on your calculator where to find this 5-number summary. All right, let's talk about data. Defining the different types of data. Numerical data is called quantitative data. These are numbers, that represent numbers, meaning they're numbers with a unit any sort of measurement or frequency. Counting the number of something. Categorical data is also called qualitative data. Now these are groups, categories, or numbers that represent a type or category of data. For example, the preferred subjects that we saw above in the box plot, not the box plot, for example, above in the bar graph example. For example, different subjects are a category. Different colors is a category. So, just because we have numbers in our data set doesn't mean that those numbers are actually representing numbers. For example, jersey numbers. If we know that someone on the soccer team is number 10, that number 10 is not representing the number 10 on the number line. The number 10 is representing the person that's wearing the jersey. So we often assign numbers people or different categories to represent them, but the numbers are not representing numbers, they're representing a category or person. So we have to keep that in mind. Just because we have numbers doesn't mean it's numerical data. They could be representing a different category or group of people. Alright, the types of graphs. Dot plots must be graphed on a number line. Grouped or not. And we can display both numerical or categorical data with a dot plot. A bar graph is used only to display categorical data. And the bars do not touch. So in a bar graph, we have the categories along the horizontal axis, and we have the frequency number of along the y-axis. And the bars should not touch. A histogram displays numerical data, and the bars do touch. So here we have numerical data along the x-axis and the y-axis, and the bars do touch. A box plot also displays numerical data. To create the 5-number summary and all box plots. Should be graphed against the number line. In this example up here, see how there's a number line underneath? A labeled number line is required for any box plot. Alright, let's start practicing. So the table shows the number of books read by students in the summer reading program. Make a dot plot of the data. So, first thing we need is a number line. See, I've got numbers between 3 and 8. Each number gets its own dot. So I've got 1, 3. Doesn't matter whether you go across or down. I'm going to go across. I've got 8, 5. Continue to make your box plot, dot plot. You did a majority of students read 5 books. The maximum read was 8. The minimum read was 3. Let's go on to number 2. So here we have numbers that are very specific, meaning we have decimals, and I have a pretty wide range. My minimum I see is 13.8, and the maximum I see is 34.4. So I'm going to create my number line. This time I'm going to group the data together. Just be exact. So now I'm going to start plotting each point that falls in. All right, looking at number 3. Here we're going to create a bar graph to represent the data. A bar graph means one of the variables must be categorical. So here we have type of music, rock, hip hop, country, and jazz. Those are our categories. And then the tallies, which represent the frequency. The frequency will always go along the y-axis, the vertical axis. So the categories, the type of music, will go along the horizontal axis. So we have rock, hip hop, country, and jazz. Frequency will go along the y-axis. I have a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 9. There are 9 people who prefer rock music. So that bar needs to go up to 9 units on the frequency. Hip hop is at 6, so that bar should have a height of 6. Country, 7. And jazz, 3. Remember, the bars do not touch in a bar graph because what we're representing are categories along the x-axis, not numbers. Right, now is where you will need your graphing calculator. So to enter data on your calculator, we're going to go to Stat. Edit is where we will enter the list. Now, if you have values in L1 or L2, we can clear the whole list by arrowing up. So L1 is highlighted. Hit clear, enter, and it will clear the list. Go up to L2, hit clear, enter, and now my lists are clear. So I'm going to enter the data. I'm going to go down. You can go down or straight across. Either one will work. When you finish entering your list, you should have 25 items. So if we arrow back up, we can see that item 25 is the number 25. I have 5 rows with 5 columns. There's 25 total. So here we should have our full list of 25 items. So once your list is entered, go to second mode, and that will take you back out to the home screen. So second mode, second quit, will take you back out to the home screen. Now, to create a histogram and a box plot, we start at the same spot. Normally, when we graph a line or a quadratic or any other equation, we go right here to y equals. Well, notice above it, it says stat plot. That's what I want to graph anything in the statistics realm. So I'm going to hit second y equals, and then we want plots 2, 3, and 4 all to be off. Go to number 1, and we're going to turn this plot on. Now, if I scroll down, the first blinking graph display is a scatter plot. That's not what I want. That's a line graph, not what I want. Here I have a histogram. It looks like the bar graphs and the bars are touching. So that's the first one I'm going to hit enter to. My X list says L1, which is where I put my list. If it doesn't say L1 for you, notice that L1 and L2 are right above the numbers 1 and 2. So you can hit second number 1 to change that to L1 if it doesn't say L1. Now to graph, we're going to go to zoom 9. See how number 9 says stat, zoom stat? We want zoom 9. Now, I should have told you that before we do this, you should check your y equals and make sure everything's cleared out here. If not, go ahead and clear it out now and hit zoom 9 again. So here we have our histogram. So to make graphing a little bit easier, I want you to go to the window button and type in the x minimum as 15 and the x maximum is 60, and set the x scale to 5, meaning it's going to count by 5s. So reset those 3 numbers, leave everything else the same, and hit graph. Now we're ready. We're not going to graph these, write them out. I'm just going to show you how to graph these on your calculator. So if you hit the trace button, it'll start with the first bar. The first bar goes from 15 to 20, and there are 2 elements in that group. I can scroll over between 20 and 25. Again, we have 2, in this case, prizes that were between 20 and 25. The next group is between 25 and 30, and here we had 3 in that range. 30 to 35, we had 4, and so on. Now, to create a box plot, I'm going to go back to second y equals, hit enter on number 1, and this time I'm going to graph the box plot. So I'm going to skip over this first one, and I'm going to go to the next one. This first one has an extra dot here. Both will graph box plots. The first one will graph it with outliers, the second one will not. So we will go ahead and graph the second one for now. Now, I still have L1 as my list because that's where my data is. I'm going to hit zoom 9. Now if we look at this box plot and I hit the trace button, I can come all the way back over here and see that my minimum value is 17. Q1, or the lower quartile, is 28. The median, or Q2, is 37. Q3, or the upper quartile, is 45.5, and the maximum is 54. Now, we're not going to draw this box plot out, but if we did, we have to graph it against a number line. If we don't graph a box plot against a number line, it will lose its shape. And we will learn in the next step why shape is so important. So on our graphing calculator, we created both the histogram and the box plot. Let's try one more example. This table shows the grades earned by students on a math test. Again, we're going to create a histogram and a box plot to represent the data. So I'm going to go to Stat, Edit. I'm going to clear this list. Go up to L1, hit Clear, Enter. So you enter your list, pause the video, come back when you're finished. Again, we have a list of 25 items, 25 test grades. So the very last item, it should say L1 parentheses 25, meaning this is a 25th number that we entered in this list. So we're going to hit second mode to get out of there. To graph, we're not going to go to y equals, we're going to go to second y equals. Number 1, make sure it's still turned on. We're first going to graph the histogram. So highlight the histogram. To graph, we go to zoom 9. Here we have our histogram. I'm going to look at the window. We're starting at 72.2 and ending at 101.4. So to even these numbers up a little bit, let's start at 70, end at 100, and count by 5s. There we go. Now if we hit trace, we can see that between 70 and 75 we have 3 test grades. Between 75 and 80 we have 3. See the maximum height of this bar between 85 and 90 we had 7 scores. We could see that the last bar between 95 and 100 there were 2 students that scored a grade this high. Let's go back to second y equals and this time graph the box plot. So go down and highlight the box plot and again hit zoom 9 to graph. We could hit trace to see that the minimum was 72.5. Q1 is 79.35. The median is 85.4. Q3 is 90. And the maximum is 97.3. So after graphing the box plot, if you hit trace, you can find those 5 numbers I was talking about in the 5-number summary here. By hitting trace and scrolling across, you'll see all 5 numbers. And finally, we just have some calculator notes reminding you how to enter data into your calculator. So to enter data, we need to hit Stat, Edit, number 1. To graph a histogram, we first have to enter the data into list 1. Then we hit second mode to get out of there. Second y equals number 1. We're going to turn that plot on. Choose the histogram and hit zoom 9 to graph. And to graph a box plot, we'll follow the same steps to graph a histogram. But under type, we want to select box plot, not the histogram. Again, hit zoom 9 to graph.